What if everything you've been told about law school just changed overnight? Florida drops the ABA requirement, Texas drops the ABA requirement, and suddenly there are tons of questions on the LSAT forums asking, does the LSAT even matter anymore? Do I still need to go to an ABA accredited law school? And is law school about to get cheaper, faster, or easier? Now, here's the truth, and I know this won't sound as exciting as the headlines, but this is not the earthquake that people think it is. And if you react to it emotionally instead of strategically, you could make one of the most expensive mistakes of your life. And so today, I want to slow this down just a bit and walk you through three things. First, what actually changed. Second, what did not change at all. And third, why being early here is far riskier than being late, because law is not a profession that rewards you for getting in early. It rewards you for being conservative, being averse to risk, and for choosing paths that you already know to work. Now, here is the precise change without the clickbait. Florida and Texas, through their state Supreme Courts, have now removed the rule that you must graduate from an ABA accredited law school in order to sit for the bar in those states. That is it. Now, notice what that sentence does not say. It does not say that ABA accredited degrees are suddenly less valuable, or that top law schools are changing their admission standards, or that employers are updating their hiring filters, or that the LSAT is obsolete. Of course, it is not, if only it were that simple. All that happened is this. The monopoly was loosened in theory so that other accreditors could exist in the future. Not today, not this cycle, and there's no actual replacement in place. There is currently no new accreditor, there is no alternative system, no proven pipeline, just permission. And that's not the same thing as having a new infrastructure. The first mistake I'm already seeing students make is treating these headlines like it's some kind of green light to take a shortcut with your legal education. And law is not the profession for taking shortcuts. We want to be very clear about what you are investing in when you pursue law school. You're not just buying classes or a JD, you are trading 3 full years of your life, 6 figures of tuition plus living expenses, and your geographic flexibility, all for a credential that will open doors. So the real question is not, can I technically become a lawyer some other way? The real question is, what doors will still be open to me after I pursue law school? And that's where accreditation from the American Bar Association still matters enormously. For several decades now, accreditation by the American Bar Association has functioned as a national signal of trust. Nobody's saying it's perfect or it's pure, but it is widely understood. It tells everybody out there who might hire you, including judges, law firms, clerkship committees, other state bars, that one single baseline of quality has been met. And of course, it's not perfect. That baseline could certainly be improved. And of course, they could also bring down the costs significantly, but replacing a national standard with nothing yet is not progress for you as the consumer. It is a vacuum. And vacuums get filled slowly when you're dealing with institutions as bureaucratic as law school accrediting bodies. And in the meantime, you might pay real costs in the short term. Now, every big structural change will, of course, facilitate the entrance of early adopters. And if you are the early adopter, you're going to pay higher tuition, of course, in actual money, in risk, and potential regret. Now, if there is some new accreditor who eventually emerges, and that's a big if, someone's going to be in the first graduating class. And unfortunately, because it is new, that class is not going to have any alumni network. It's not going to have any familiarity with employers. And of course, there won't be any precedent or historical bar passage data. And that means you are at risk when it comes to paying student loans. So you don't want to be explaining 5 years from now why your degree is technically valid, but practically, unfortunately, somewhat limiting, especially when the traditional path of going to an ABA accredited law school is still available and it's still the main game in town. Now, I know the LSAT is unpopular, nobody wants to take it, but for that reason, misinformation unfortunately spreads faster when it comes to the LSAT being required or not to that question. And so, if you are applying to ABA accredited law schools, which still includes virtually every reputable school, and there are nearly 200 of them in the United States, nothing changes for you. Admissions committees still rely on the LSAT, merit scholarships are still heavily LSAT driven, and the rankings, I'm talking US News here, they still reward LSAT medians. And so, if anything, uncertainty makes strong signals like your LSAT score more valuable rather than less. Because when institutions feel instability, they don't abandon metrics, they cling to the ones that they trust. And so, if you were hoping that these headlines meant you could aim lower, you could prep less, you could take the easy way out and skip the LSAT entirely, I'm sorry to tell you, that's not the best path forward, and that hope is unfortunately misplaced. The good news, though, is that the LSAT remains the single biggest lever you control in this process when it comes to getting into better law schools, getting more scholarship money, or both. And I know you're thinking about the question of prestige. Prestige does not disappear overnight because of some court order from a single state or two. It erodes slowly over several decades, if it erodes at all. Law is a conservative profession in the literal sense. I don't mean politically here. I just mean they value precedent, they value hierarchy, they value longevity, they value predictability. That's why top law schools won't drop accreditation from the American Bar Association anytime soon. Mid-tier schools can't afford to. And so that leaves you with the bottom ranked schools, which you probably don't want to go to anyway because they have the worst employment outcomes and the worst bar passage rates. And employers certainly are not going to gamble on some new unfamiliar credential. And even the states making these changes, I'm talking here Florida and Texas, they're quietly acknowledging this by saying they still care about bar passage rates and they still care about employment outcomes, which raises an obvious question. If the standards are basically the same, why change the label? I think it just comes down to politics. It comes down to virtue signaling. And politics aside, the answer for you as a student is pretty simple. Follow the signal that the market actually rewards because you are the one investing your time, your money. Law school is a six-figure gamble. When you consider an average cost of attendance of roughly $84,000 per year, multiply that by 3, it's $250,000. And the risk that almost no one talks about enough is that, let's say you attend a non-ABA accredited law school that's approved only in one state. What happens if your spouse gets a job elsewhere? What happens if your parents have a health issue and need you in another state? What happens if your practice area changes? You might end up moving. Can you predict with absolute certainty that sometime in the next 40 years, you might not relocate to a different state where your law degree is no longer transferable because you didn't go to an ABA approved law school? Of course, lawyers move, lives change, and going to an ABA approved law school has historically made it possible for you to move and still port your JD over to a different state. But if you remove that safety net, that means you are betting that your future self will never need flexibility, and that is a pretty risky bet. And of course, the recent changes with Florida and Texas could possibly lead to innovation longer term. They could pressure accreditors to streamline things, simplify things, bring down the cost. But those are long-term systemic effects. They don't help you applying to law school in the next year or two. And the incentives when it comes to legal education have not shifted in any meaningful way yet. ABA accredited law schools are still dominating hiring, clerkships, federal opportunities, and of course the LSAT is still the path to getting into the best law school possible and getting as much scholarship money as possible. And so If you are in a position where you are choosing between a respected ABA accredited law school and some cheaper, untested alternative with uncertain outcomes, you're making a pretty risky gamble. And those savings could vanish fast if you struggle to pass the bar. You are then limiting your job options, you're getting screened out automatically, and law school is expensive no matter where you go. The real cost is not your tuition, it is the opportunity cost. And so the calm, rational move for you, if you're applying the next couple of years, is to double down on what you can control, which means maximizing your LSAT, targeting strong, established schools, and thinking long term, not in terms of politics. Because the people who will be least affected by these changes are the ones who have already positioned themselves well. Of course, someone else can be the first to experiment. Someone else is going to be the one to learn the hard way, but there is no prize for being first here. There's no benefit for you being the guinea pig. What Florida and Texas have done here is largely a symbolic move, but a symbolic move does not forgive your debt. They're not going to pay your tuition for you. And the lack of transferability across state lines is a big gamble. And so until the hiring market changes its behavior, the smart move remains the same. You want to take the LSAT seriously, aim for the best school you can get into with as much scholarship money as possible, and don't gamble 3 years of your life.